Post from Cadden86. What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Comment from kerwapple. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was the car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at and I said just some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years. I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. Could not explain it and have never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. Comment from the man_the beard. When I was a teenager, my family lived in a big 115-year-old brick house. Plenty of creepy stuff happened, but one night I was heading to bed when the door between the first-floor kitchen and the basement stairs absolutely slammed shut. It had a unique sound that I recognized immediately as the kitchen-basement door. There were no windows open that could have caused a draft. Our dog was asleep on the second floor. I was on the second floor. My parents were both asleep in the third-floor attic, had been converted to a master bedroom. None of us could have shut the door. Fucking terrified. I worked up the courage to go investigate, carrying my hilariously teeny pocket knife for protection. As I went downstairs I turned on every light. When I reached the kitchen, the door was wide open. Even more freaked out I ran back up to bed, leaving the lights on. A minute or two later, I heard a definite SSSSHHHHOKOK from downstairs. I laid in bed and was ready to accept my demise. Eventually I somehow fell asleep and in the morning I was there first downstairs. I woke up before my parents and dog, and found that the lights were all off and the basement door had been shut again. Comment from Cowgirl in the Sand too. Weird but happy. About 5 years ago in November we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog my children grew up with. Loved by all. At the next Christmas. At the end of the day of gifts, food and family. As I was picking up, I found a tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantel. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay. Weird. But took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of that Christmas break, he asked if he could take the little figurine to remember his dog. Of course. I said yes. A week or two later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No, I didn't. It's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found a second figurine. Again, no one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on a shelf to this day. Comment from ruchull. About a year ago me and my cousin visited Los Angeles. We were driving around using Google Maps and after missing our third or fourth exit we swear we both heard it sigh loudly before it rerouted us. We freaked out and made sure our driving was on point the rest of the ride. The rest of the trip there, if we missed any of our exits or turns, we always apologized to Google, so hopefully she would know we were just morons and not assholes. Comment from Adventuredepot. Removed a painting from the wall during a late evening cleaning. Put it away and returned to the wall to see a never-before-seen painting on the same spot. Put a chill down my spine. Comment from thebronzebear. I used to have a recurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on the patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone, waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I'm digging in my wallet for a couple dollars and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run out into the road I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while the dream stopped and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at an on the border. On the patio waiting for my food. A homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant but doesn't stop and ask for change. It makes me think about that dream though and I start to feel uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out there but stop at the sidewalk and look out towards incoming traffic, and there is an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection completely unaware of what had just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everyone was fine. Comment from BanditSixActual. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room and it must be a full moon. Because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador Retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared. Snarling. Hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story. But she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house. Got a gun and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit and I found out they watched some rental movies and, of course, we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times. So I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. Edit. Punctuation. Comment from Thin Man. I wouldn't say that this was creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced, so. Back in 2016, I was injured at work and for about 6 months my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book I liked to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in this book was named Ilya, and because I know someone named Ilya, and because the book is set in Los Angeles where I live, the Ilya in the book became the Ilya that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Ilya in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Ilya I know is a huge fan of. The Ilya in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Ilya that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to the Ilya that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Ilya knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles, and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. Comment from BastardsOfMidnight. I've told this story before. 3 years ago my childhood dog died very suddenly and unexpectedly. She was sick for a few days, but turned it around and got better before dying very quickly and painfully. In my dad's arms. I live out of state so I wasn't able to be there for any of it. It's a 6-hour drive, and I felt very guilty about her passing without me there. I had a very deep connection to her and she had been my best friend for 12 years. I was devastated by her death. I couldn't work or eat or do much of anything. I was constantly bursting into tears, it was just awful. My heart just ached and I found myself apologizing to her for not being there. I just felt so guilty. One night I had a dream about her. I dreamt I was in this empty space and Charlie came running up to me, whimpering excitedly. She was licking my face and generally just freaking out, and I was sobbing. I knew she was dead and I knew she was visiting me in my dream. I was very aware of it all. I kept hugging her and crying and apologizing and she just kept licking my face and being affectionate. I woke up with tears streaming down my face and sat up in bed. I could still smell her distinctive smell and on my sleeve I pulled off one of her hairs. She had never been to my apartment and I hadn't seen her recently. It wasn't a cat hair either, as Charlie was a collie mix and their fur pattern is very distinctive. It may all be coincidence, but it was so vivid and real. I like to think she was visiting to let me know everything is okay and to not worry. I haven't had a dream like that since. Comment from battle_narwhal53. Not my story. But my grandpa's. So he served in the Navy and hadn't come home for 5 years. He finally got to go home. And on his way, he saw his old friend. Let's call him Wally. Wally was getting on his normal bus. And my grandpa shouted, "Hi," to him. But Wally didn't respond. But he didn't think much of it. Seeing how Wally didn't have the best hearing. Wally got on his bus. And looked my grandpa in the eye as the bus drove away. Later, after he got home and was talking to his dad, he asked him how Wally was doing and told his dad about how he saw him earlier. His dad was silent for a minute. And asked him if he was sure he saw Wally. My grandpa said yes. And his dad replied, "Wally died 6 months ago." Quote. Comment from HoldTheChimichanga. I died. I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I'm going crazy, but I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to across the street to Sonic. Across the school there is not heavy traffic. But if you don't pay attention you could get hit. Well, I remember walking with him and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden I was back in the stadium again and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go get Sonic, but I was freaking out. Was asking him everything. I thought it had to be a dream. So I went with him just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street, just messed up. Not even moving. Comment from MRSBMW330 She. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird but explained it away, thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me, until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" Comment from nithararith. One day when I was about 8 I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc. But he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. Comment from Dolios 6757. Might get buried, but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. Comment from friendshipwins. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol just for fun, it's not. She's a little ray of sunshine. And started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted, "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us, Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name. And these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company. And then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip. And I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced. And has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. Comment from VoiceOfSchmille. Several years ago, I went home, turned on my PC, browsed the web for a bit, literally watched a video about the Matrix, then looked out of my window. Then I suddenly snapped awake sitting in my chair. I looked at my monitor to see that it had turned off. I thought strange. I must have fallen asleep and proceeded to move the mouse to wake my PC from sleep mode. It did not wake up. I was confused until I noticed that the power strip was not even plugged in. It had never been turned on in the first place. That one weirded me out for quite a while. I must have gone home, fell asleep and dreamt the whole thing, at least I hope so. *Edit. Small clarification ** edit 2. Added AT that changes the tone drastically. Nice theory though you, anonymous horror, *. Comment from Hambone 1981. My wife and I were at the local mall shopping. We were walking around in Spencer's and there was a display with a bunch of sexy, slutty boxed outfits. Once we saw them, we both blurted out, "This looks like something Samantha, an acquaintance we both knew from mutual friends, would wear." At the exact same time, we started laughing about it, and as we walked around the corner, the Samantha we were talking about was looking at the exact same rack but from the other side. We were both like, "What in the fuck?" We hadn't seen her in probably a year or so before then. That left everyone scratching their heads for a bit. Comment from SM127. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and didn't really realize how glitchy in the Matrix it was until people started commenting haha. In college, I took a hard news, soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent. But if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about. I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late. 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s. He was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. Comment from WaterMele 3. About 2 years ago. I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car, and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed two people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers. Older-looking professionals. Both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag and the lady was further ahead than the man. With her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers. Not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play and the two strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. Comment from KitKeating. 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a streetlight. So the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up. Reached down to pet him. And he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill.
Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.